ألا بذكرك قلبي يطمئن ألا.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Let's just get started. I don't know if you heard anything that I was saying about you, but we're going to go from your youth first, all right? And growing up in Mississippi. Just give us a little bit about growing up in Mississippi and how long were you there? When did you ultimately leave Mississippi?
I left Mississippi when I left to go to college when I was 19 years old. I went to LSU. I lived in a couple of places, the majority of which was in Gulfport, Mississippi, but I also lived for a year in Biloxi, which is right up the street. I grew up in a single parent home with my mother. I never knew who my father was. It wasn't until my first year in the NBA when she finally told me that the person that helped bring me into this world was a white guy. My older brother also, his father's white. My younger brother's the only one with an African-American father. Grew up relatively poor, in ghetto section of town called Sirius City. Also grew up in the projects, part of town they used to call Avondale Circle. I have two brothers, one older, 3 years older, and one is 7 years younger. My older brother is David. My younger brother is Umar. I also grew up with, while in Mississippi, with a neurological disorder. So that also helped to form and shape who I became, good and bad.
Okay, so we will definitely get to what that neurological situation was. But what I want to ask you is, where exactly is Gulfport, Mississippi? Is it upper, lower, near the Delta? Where?
No, it's not near the Delta. That's more north. I'm about 1 hour away from New Orleans, one direction, and another direction 1 hour away from Mobile, Alabama. It's on the Gulf of Mexico.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So just tell us, give us a few positives of being in Mississippi and some of the negatives, some things that you may have experienced as a child or in middle school or high school.
Well, I mean, as a child, I mean, you're kind of in so many ways. There's so much that you don't know. You're in a sense shielded. You're just enjoying your childhood. You tend to not see the true effects of poverty because your surroundings, everybody is living like you are. I mean, of course, you see where there are other neighborhoods that are nicer, but you're too busy, I guess, enjoying each other, for the lack of a better word. But when I became older a little bit, and when I say older, maybe I'm thinking more so closer to the junior high years. Mm-hmm. The thing that used to bother me at that age was to see people that I looked up to that was raising me, my mother, my uncle, my aunts, that I admired, that taught me values of the importance of prayer and God and all of those things, and praying for people more than yourself, was when they had to confront white people. They would almost have this type of very submissive attitude, like head down type of thing. I didn't see the confidence, discharged from them as if though we were in our own little circle. You could see the confidence and the certainty, but in front of white people, you would see this submissiveness, almost like a slave-like behavior. And it was something that confused me, as a child. And I knew that it's something that, even though I couldn't necessarily put my finger on it, I knew it's something that I didn't want for myself. Right. But even though I didn't want it for myself, it was something that I found myself doing. And when I was put in those similar situations, I would find myself getting nervous and not being able to or not feeling like I had the courage to articulate what it was that I wanted. You know, they say your environment has a way of molding and shaping you. And so that's one of the things that I could remember as a child that really rubbed me the wrong way. But, you know, I didn't necessarily go looking deep into the dynamics of it, like what was causing that, and, you know, all of the barriers that are, you know, that are placed in front of us that tend to, I think, influence us to behave that way.
Right.
Just
So, well,
in order to just to survive. Yes.
let me just ask you then, was that the early on or the onset of what was considered at today even racism, that in the way that things were being handled at that time, maybe you didn't know the words of what was going on, even areas around segregation, probably integration, engaging in what people would like to be able to do, but because you were in Mississippi, and I'm not going to say because I live in New Jersey that we don't too also experience certain things, but do you think that that was the beginning of what you were to recognize as racism later as a man?
Of course, there's no question. You began to really question a lot when you know, even who lives on the other side of the railroad tracks.
Hmm.
Those homes look better, cleaner lawns. They're mostly populated with white people.
Mhm.
And, you know, you don't go into a deep study of it, but you notice it. You can't help but notice it. But
Yes.
but you're taught to just look, you know, at the same time, you know, to concentrate on yourself, and you know, as a child, you're too busy at the same time trying to do the best you can and survive and live. So and that just wasn't my orientation, you know, in terms of to be a critical thinker. I didn't grow up in that type of family where we read a lot or we discussed issues, those type of issues, or you were taught how to problem solve or be critical thinkers. And so, yeah, it didn't go that, I mean, but you notice it. You notice it doesn't feel right, but at that age, it didn't register to the point, man, I need to really find out the inner dimensions of why things are the way they are.
Right. Well, let's delve a little more into the childhood, middle school, and high school just for a moment. What was your favorite subject when you were in school? Did you have a favorite teacher? What were your hobbies back then?
Yeah, my favorite subject was physical education.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
no, seriously. But I did enjoy um, certain teachers. I can't really remember um, the elementary years or necessarily the junior high years. But I do remember there was an African American teacher named Miss Lindsay, and it wasn't so much about, you know, the class. It was just more so about her being a strong black woman and a motherly type, and
Okay.
didn't let you get away with anything. And even though her class, she challenged you and she got on you, you felt in some way leaving the class, regardless if you liked it or not, you felt that she was genuine, that she really cared.
Okay.
And so I remember that about Miss Lindsay. And I think she's still living. But I appreciated certain days, history class, you know, just to learn about different peoples and different cultures.
Right.
That class kind of, not all the time, but on occasion, interested me. But outside of that, school was something that I was just passing through. I never looked at education, like I said before. I never looked at education. One, I had like you know, I grew up with, and I hate to say this, but it's the reality, but I grew up with like an inferiority complex, looked at myself as inadequate when it came to academics. I didn't see myself as having a future academically. And so that's why you taught not to put all your marbles in one basket, but that's why I put all my marbles basically in one basket, trying to be the best basketball player I can be. Because as a child, you don't see, you know, the images that you see of people, especially on television, people that are successful, right? People that have the things that you want, are actors and entertainers and athletes.
Mm.
you know,
Yes.
and even though you see tall buildings, architecture, you see doctors and lawyers, at that age, it didn't resonate to me because a lot of the doctors and the lawyers that we did know, they lived in homes that looked like mine. So I'm like, well, this isn't an image of success, right? That I have in my mind of what I want. I want to be wealthy. I want to be rich. I want to be able to take care of my family. I want to be able to take care of people. And so I didn't see education as a means of getting that. You know, when you get older, you look at things, and you say, wow, look at these buildings. Somebody had to learn how to construct these things, and somebody had to learn how to put this business together. But at that time, I didn't see education that way. We were taught, go to school so you can get a good job. And a lot
So,
of the good, yeah.
well, let me just ask you, what kind of job, since that was your where you were growing up, and what you saw is what was available for you, and you could see with perhaps the doctors and the lawyers and whomever that were from your community, what job were you aspiring to? Or
Uh,
were you thinking then, is that where the sports bug got you?
yeah, that's it. For me, now I did entertain briefly uh, uh, music, you know, wanting to in some way be involved with music. But
Okay.
again, that's entertainment. Um, and so that's where my mind was as a child, because I did notice that at a young age, I was athletic. I
Yes.
had, you know, fast twitch muscles, uh, you know, and I caught on easy when it came to sports. And it was something that I enjoyed and loved doing. So for me, that was like, hey, this is what I want to do. At the age of 9, I knew that. This was no guesswork. At the age of 9, I knew that I wanted to be the best basketball player that ever lived. And at
So
that
were you
moment,
playing?
I decided to begin to chart out a strategy to see to it that hopefully I had the best chances of reaching that goal.
Were you playing at 9 years old at school or street ball or anything like that?
I was uh I was playing street ball. I was at on a basketball court at Central Elementary in Gulfport, um, the school at the time that I was going to in the fourth grade. And there's a lady named Miss Asaleta, this strong black woman that was also into sports. She would see children who she thought had ability, and she would try to steer them into certain sports. Well, she saw me playing one day, and I was with my older brother and his friend. And I didn't know that literally right next to us, I knew it was a gym because I went to the school, but there was no cars out there.
Mm.
And in the gym, they were trying out for the fourth grade basketball team. I didn't know, but she drove up and she saw me on the playground and she asked me to come over. And I came over and she said, listen, she said, go in there and try out. I said, Ms. Cookie, you're gonna have to ask my mother. She said, don't worry about your mama. I'll deal with your mama. Go try out. And that's when it started for me in terms of organized basketball. I went in, I did well. I started my first year, first game, I had 21 points, and I was hooked. You know, as a result of that.
Um, well, with that beginning for you at
Hold
the
on,
time, and
turn it
others
off. Just turn
taking
it
some
off.
interest in what you wanted to do, let's just kind of go into the issue that you experienced around Tourette syndrome. And I want to ask that right now so that we can kind of get past it. Did that start when you were a younger person or were you in high school? And what were some of the manifestations of Tourette syndrome? And can you explain what that is for us?
Briefly, Tourette syndrome is a neurological disorder. And the way I always have explained it, it's your mind is sending messages, um, mixed messages to your body, and they're not on the same page. And it's like being a perfectionist. If I touch something and it doesn't feel right, or my mind will register that doesn't feel right. Touch it again, and I have to keep touching it until my mind and my body are on the same wavelength. And and so it would take me very long time uh, to finish things, whether it was reading, whether it was even training, basketball. But basketball was where it necessarily didn't show as much, maybe because there was a lot of movement and jerking and change of direction. But that's pretty much what Tourette's is. It's from the moment you wake up in the morning to, your body tensing up. I would throw my arm out to the point where numerous occasions, man, I was in such pain. It felt like I was going to dislocate my elbow. I would pop my neck aggressively. And at times you feel like the skull in your head is, your brain is hitting your skull. You're holding your breath, almost feeling like you're about to have an aneurysm. You're putting your clothes on, taking them off, putting them on, taking them off. I mean, it's constant. It may take 45 minutes sometimes just to get outside. And then it's just every little step you're trying to control your movements, trying to stay at peace and stay balanced. So, but that's a part of also, I think, what had me, I couldn't, in school, for example, especially at that age, children can be brutal. Yes. And they see you and how, they can jank you, as they say back in the day. And so it became very difficult for me in school to concentrate or to listen and learn, because I was too busy trying to stay still in order not to have people talk about me. So you're sitting in your desk and you're too busy trying to focus on breathing right, not jerking, not, looking strange. You can't possibly focus as well on what the teacher is saying. Right. And so as a result of that, when I was in junior high school, and I wasn't slow in learning. I just was disinterested. School, I never really came across consistently. One, it wasn't in our house. We didn't have a lot of books. We had television, right? Yes. And at the same time, I didn't come across a lot of teachers that made the information stand out, like to where it would excite me, right? And interest me on a consistent level. So school was something I was just more disinterested. Yeah. And the only reason I think I passed every year, and it was barely, not that it couldn't have been better, was because they said, well, you have to have a C in order to play basketball. So I only did enough just so that I can stay in the game. I never meant to, I never strove to, let me see how smart I can be, how intelligent I can be. I'm like, look, I just want to do bare minimum, because my goal is to, to be the best in basketball. And I felt that spending too much time with schoolwork would take away from my time on the basketball court. So all of that played a part, sister, in, I think, just not just my looking at myself in so many ways as being inadequate and inferiority complex, but also just my inability, or I was viewed as not very smart. And I remember in junior high, a teacher called my mother to the school, and I didn't know what the meeting was about. And I mean, I was devastated when I found out why. Okay. Because he ended up telling them, Miss Jackson, we want to put your son in a special education class. I was gonna ask. And at this age, one, I'm a basketball player. I got notoriety now, right? I got Tourette's syndrome. I'm trying to hide that. Now you trying to put me in a special education class? Right. Man, that's gonna kill me if people find out. They already think I'm not smart. And I'm looking at my mother like, please don't. Yeah. And because she had an 8th grade education, and sometimes you look at people in authority as knowing better, they know what's best. She conceded, okay, go ahead. And that whole time I had to find a way to avoid. We would go and we'd have to walk in a line together, and I would find ways to act like I wasn't in the line with them. And it was no offense to people who needed that class. I just didn't feel I needed it. Right. And so eventually the teacher, it was a male, white male, I can't remember his name. He said, if you guys in this class can show me within 3 months that you don't belong, I'll get you out of here. And man, that was my opportunity. I just buckled down, I did my work. And he said, well, you don't belong here. I said, well, that's what I was trying to tell you. And I eventually got out of that class. But that was something that literally, man, it terrified me at that age, you know, because you know, your reputation, your image, right, especially at that age, is very critical. And I was able to, by Allah, escape detection, or, you know, so to speak. But it was very difficult, and from then on, it just I just began to say, you know, let me at least do enough. Uh, so,
So you weren't really pushing yourself, and it doesn't sound like the people around you were necessarily giving you the maybe even the inspiration or the confidence that you needed to move forward. How did you then decide, or how did you decide to go to college and go to LSU? Was it all about basketball, or was part of it your academics and social life that you were going to
Oh,
experience?
wait. Isn't there a plate down here?
Excuse me,
somebody need to
somebody.
turn off their microphone.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what made you finally decide to go on to college, and how did you also select LSU?
Well, going to college was strictly off of my ability to play basketball. I was highly recruited from colleges all over the nation by the grace and mercy of Allah. And my going to LSU was the outcome of that. But the reason I chose LSU, there was an assistant coach that just made me feel that it was more than basketball. You know, he made me feel that he really cared
Mm-hmm.
about me as a person. We talked for hours and hours, and 90-some% of our phone calls had nothing to do with basketball. It just had something to do with life.
Okay.
And so that's really the reason I went to LSU. And they never promised me anything like, oh, you're going to start immediately. They just said, look, if you're the man for the spot, you have it. And I like those odds. I don't, when someone was, there were teams that would say, look, you're going to come and start right away. But that always raised the red flag in my mind, because you don't know what tomorrow brings. You don't know what guy may come in here and outplay me, possibly, right? How can you offer me something you don't know what tomorrow brings? So to me, it didn't seem right. And, but it was all pretty much because of my basketball. But I remember going to LSU, and when I finally signed, speaking about, again, education, right? And my whole time through school, I memorized my way through. I never really learned anything. I was good in memorization, right? Because Tourette's also, you do stuff over and over. And I would do just enough. And sometimes I'm like probably hovering around an F, or, you know, a low D. But a test would come, and I would study, memorize what I needed to memorize, just enough to do well on the test, just to boost my grade up. Now, if you would have asked me 2 days later, 3 days later, something on that test, I probably wouldn't know. You would have thought I would have cheated, because I literally memorized. So I went to LSU, and I remember they put me through this. It's like they had me sitting in a room to assess, I guess, where I was mentally. They had me reading stuff. They were asking me questions. And I could, even at a young age, I could spell well and I could read well. I could spell words I didn't know. You know, I used to be in a spelling bee in elementary school. So, but I never really sat down to define what words meant, right? And to pull like the deeper meaning out of, or the context out of what I'm reading. So as I'm reading, this person that was conducting, you know, the test or whatever, stopped me, and they said, well, pointed at, what does this word mean? I said, I don't know. Now, if you were listening to me reading, you'd be like, wow, he reads so well, he must be intelligent. They asked me another word. I said, I don't know. She asked me another word. At this moment, I'm starting to feel humiliated and exposed now. I mean, it's one of the, I mean, literally, I can remember like yesterday, it's one of the lowest moments I felt. And I said, you know, I was like sitting there, man. I said, I don't know.
So
And she
this
said,
is
well,
when
what
you
do you
were,
get out this story? She said, what do you get out this story? Because I was just reading, sounding good. I couldn't even recall what I just read. They
was
put
this
me
when
in
you
a, they
were
put me in a
at
reading,
Brother?
a remedial reading class.
I don't know if you can hear me. Brother Mahmoud, was this when you were at LSU?
Yes,
That
this is LSU.
that you were, well, let me just, were you on scholarship there?
Yes, I was. I
You
was on
were.
scholarship.
So didn't you have to produce certain things academically just to continue to be on scholarship?
Yes, of course. I had to take the, I forget if it was a SAT or ACT in Mississippi. The first time I took the test, I missed it by 1 point.
Oh,
The
wow.
second time, I think I missed it by a couple or so. And then at that time, there was a doctor there that had developed an interest in me, uh, who was kind of taking care of me a little bit while I was going through the process of recruiting. And he made it. I forget what. There was this African American sister. He had made it so that I had an exception that I could take the test privately, right, and have as much time as I needed. And at that moment, and I never really said this, and you know, we're in the process of writing a book right now, and I never really said this necessarily publicly, but, and I can't remember her name, but I'm super grateful that she did it,
Mhm.
because I can only imagine what my career would have been without it. But as I was sitting in that room and I was going through, she was watching everything I was doing and I was answering questions. I don't know how she did it. She was genius. But after, there's some questions that I would answer and she wouldn't necessarily blurt out the answer. She would just, certain times she would say, you sure that's the answer you want to choose? And I would stop, and I knew what that meant. And so I go back and look, and then I check it, and she'd be quiet. She didn't do that a lot, but she did it just enough for me. And then I eventually I made it by 1 point to go to LSU. And then after that, my career just exploded, and here I am now.
Okay, so let's move on. We're going to get out of LSU, although there was one other person that I'm familiar with that graduated from LSU, was there, I think, after you, Shaquille O'Neal.
Mhm.
He was also a student at LSU, correct?
Yes, he was.
Yes. Okay, well, we won't really get into all of him, but just wanted to mention, well, let's just get to your athletic life. When exactly did that begin? And were you recruited out of LSU? And how did that all take place? What did you have to do to prepare yourself? And as you know, I've sent several questions to you, so I would like for us to try and go back and forth as quickly as possible to get through most of your athletic life. So how did that begin, the professional part of your athletic life?
When you say professional, you mean from college
Okay.
or from the NBA?
No, the MBA. Once you left college.
Yeah, well, that came as a result of how well I did at LSU. My first year as a freshman, I ended up averaging 30.2 points a game. But even before that, coming out of high school, I was the #1 guard in the nation. And I had an experience with Michael Jordan at the Nike camp in Princeton, New Jersey, where I scored on him twice. He brought me out on the basketball court and asked me, basically we were one-on-one, and I scored on him real easy 2 times in a row. And then from there, just my notoriety skyrocketed. So after going to LSU, I just had an amazing 2 years. First year, 30.2. The second year, I think 28 point something points a game. And, anytime you do that, you bring attention to yourself. So the word came out that I would be in the lottery, the top 5, 1 through 5.
Okay.
And so I decided to leave. And I left because there was an incident that took place. I was already contemplating it, but I went home to see my mother. And I'm in college. I'm eating good. I'm living good. But I go home and I see where my mother's refrigerator is empty. And I go into the bathroom and I'm washing my hands and the sink fell through. And that's when I came out and I was angry. And I just, I don't like cursing, uh, but I have. And I just came out, man. I said, man, the hell with this. I'm done. I'm going to the league because I felt it was an insult. Here it is. I'm making millions for a university, and I'm eating good. And my mother and my brother is at home, pretty much it seems, halfway starving. So I made up my mind at that point. I'm out. And so Dale Brown, I ended up talking to him, and he didn't necessarily, he did, but necessarily try to keep me there. He decided, look, man, this is the best time for you to go. We're gonna even give you the ball even more, to showcase what you have. And yeah.
So, well, let me just ask you, one of the questions that I had spoke to you briefly about, and I know we're not going to go into it extensively, but it's about the NCAA and how they treat the athletes around the country and how the colleges and universities are making a lot of money, and the students are not getting anything. Let's say we're just going to go on to the NBA, how you were selected and you moved into what was your life then. So how was that for you?
It was a challenge. I'd never really been on my own where I had to take care of everything pretty much on my own, find a place to stay, pay for my, pay my bills, pay insurance, all those things that adults do. So it was there was a moment my first year I was really depressed. I was going through a lot of anxiety. It was a new area too. I'd never lived in a place where it snowed, and so the gloominess of it all as well, affected me. A coach that didn't draft me, the one that drafted me, ended up being fired. So they brought Paul Westhead in, who I don't think really wanted me. So I was dealing with that also. So it was a tough. I was actually contemplating that first year giving basketball up. I was so miserable, but I ended up fighting through it. And but during that time, I think what helped me was I was still, in a sense, holding on to my, trying to hold on rather to my faith, but it had been shaken by a book that I was given while I was at LSU by the head coach, who's this pale white guy from North Dakota. He gave me the autobiography of Malcolm. And after, reading his life, that was on my mind my first year. And I had a lot of questions about my faith. And so that's definitely something that I was thinking about. And after that first year, I ended up becoming a Muslim, which then began to just change the way I perceived a lot of things around me, as well as the way I began to approach the game. And I knew I had to try to do the best I can to make a rebound to get back to where I was.
Right. So let's stop right here for a moment. I do want to say to the people that are in the audience, those of you that are observing and hearing what we're talking about, there will be a Q&A segment where you can ask Brother Mahmoud questions, or you can ask me some questions, but we will get to that in about, I think, about 20 minutes from now. So please go either to the chat place, however you do that, or write them down so that you can ask your questions. And we do want to say, when you get to the point of asking your questions, ask the question. Please not go into a 10-minute comment. And I can't say that you can't comment, but at least get to your question, because this program will be over at 5 o'clock. We're trying not to have to go beyond that particular time. But let me just get back to you, Brother Mahmoud. What exactly, very, very briefly, what was your faith tradition before you actually became a Muslim? What was it? How did you grow up, and how did that affect your life?
I was a I was a Christian who was following the persuasion of, well, I was a Baptist.
Okay.
Um,
And what kind
and
of Baptist? I think I had asked you. What type of Baptist?
well, you know, I grew up and I don't know all the different layers of, uh,
The subgroups of them.
right, the subgroups, but I do remember spending a lot of time also in sanctified churches where you go in the morning and you don't come out until that evening or that night. And those were like brutal, especially as a child to try to endure. But my most of what I got in terms of religion at that age was my grandmother, and then after that it was my uncle Robert and my aunt, but my grandmother mostly. And it helped. It helped. Uh, it helped me in that I was a even in elementary school I was that child, and even now I carry this practice with me. In Islam we call it dhikr, right? Constantly remembering Allah. But I
Yes.
was, as a child, I would walk the streets if I'm driving, you know, even when I got older, if I'm passing by a church, I would turn the music off. But I'm constantly, you know, thinking and praying to myself, asking God to bless me, to bless my family, to bless people around the world. And also I used to stay up at night and I used to watch these images almost every night around midnight, give or take, of children, these infomercials showing children starving and stuff. And, you know, and I would sit there crying profusely, man, please God, put me in a position to help these people someday. And that really was something that was a part of what pushed me so hard. Not the only thing, but that's one of the things that pushed me so hard to succeed, because because, you know, when you have more, right, you can do more. And
Yes.
so I would think about that, man, and that stuff would help wake me up in the morning. You know, to train. I'm talking about train like my life was on the line. So it definitely helped me in remembering my relationship to that degree at the time with, you know, knowing that there was a higher power
Right.
and that you're beholden to that higher power and that you have to be conscientious of, you know, how you live this life. Uh, you know, and I'm grateful. I'm super grateful for them for that. Yeah.
Well,
And
so let's you you become a Muslim. Um, I think you said when you were still in college, or just with the MBA when you first got to the
right,
MBA. Right.
right.
So let me just ask you the unfortunate issue that took place around when you were required. Well, I don't want to say required, but people have to stand for the flag and stand for the singing of the national anthem. But that was not something that you really felt you wanted to do or you felt comfortable with that. What were you thinking as your teammates and other people in the stadium were singing this national anthem and saluting the flag? What was it that you felt that said, no, I don't want to do this?
Well, there was a lot of thoughts, but just briefly, uh, you know, after I became Muslim, I started meeting a lot of people, and the best education that I've received uh, up until this time, even, has been those moments being on the road where Muslims would come to my room almost every city I came to. And we would talk about so many different issues: politics, religion, history, sociology. I mean, and they would introduce me to books and authors that I'd never known. And when I started reading, and there was this particular guy in Denver named Bashir out of Philadelphia. He owned a bookstore called Salam Books on Colfax. And it was so much Islamic material, but it was also political material. There's a lot of material that he had, and I would sit with him for hours. I would I probably bought every book he had in his, almost every book he had in his store at the time. But just starting to read, and like, you know, Noam Chomsky's and Gore Vidal's, and,
Oh,
you know,
wow.
just even Kwanzaa Kunjufu and Amos N. Wilson's and all of these people, man, I'm like, and I'm coming across stuff about this country. I'm coming across stuff about foreign and domestic policy. And I'm like, wow, there's a system behind why people are poor. There's a system behind why people are incarcerated. There's a system, you know,
Yes.
capitalism ain't something that is something that should be applauded. You know, and then so you know, you're reading Quran at the same time too, when you're listening to what Allah is saying, you understanding from my understanding of what Tawheed means and
Mhm.
how the universe, the universe, runs according to an order, and that how Allah says that whoever doesn't govern by what Allah establishes is a kafir or a dhalim, or in all of these lists. And then I'm looking at how the Prophet ﷺ, how he navigated it, the decisions that he made. And even when they asked him to recognize the system, the Qurayshi system, who was the superpower at that time in Arabia, even with the gesture of his finger, and he wouldn't even acknowledge it with the gesture of his finger. And they offered him all of these things, and he said, if you put the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left, never would I denounce this mission which is from Allah, as if to say that if I give in, if I recognize and endorse your system, if I accept these offers from you as a recognition of your system, by extension, I'm denouncing this deen, this system that Allah has given us. And so I'm reading that among many, many other things. And I said, man, I can't, no way in the world I can see myself, if this is what I'm striving for, to stand for a symbol that doesn't stand for and represent what it says it represents in terms of human fairness and freedom and justice. I said, I can't do it. And so those, among so many other things, is what was circulating in my mind. And this is why I didn't do it. And even how, when we look at concepts of nationalism,
Yes.
right? Which I think, I think is like patriotism on steroids in an unhealthy way, right? So we fall in love with a country and a people, regardless of what it does. No, this is not the Islamic way. Allah says, stand up for justice, stand up against injustice, even if it's against yourself.
Yes.
So this is part and parcel of some of the things I was thinking about as I was going through that process. But I was never doing it initially to gain notoriety. It was like, I'm still searching. I'm still trying to understand all of what's happening. And they ended up bringing it to me before I brought it to them, publicly. And so I spoke my conscience.
Well, let me just ask you, as we begin to pull our part to an end, we do have a few more minutes, but I want to ask, as you've traveled throughout the world, what do you find different from America in terms of the disparities and inequalities in other countries that are perhaps part of their culture, and the monies that they have, compared to what you've experienced in the United States? What do you find that's different, what you like and what you don't like?
Well, before I answer that question, that's a great question. Of course, we all know that there's problems everywhere.
Yes.
And there are always trade-offs, right? We look at here, we look at there. But when I travel, and I'm going to say this, I was asked a question not too long ago by a guy from ESPN. He said, well, people will say if you don't like it here, this is the typical reactionary, I think, response when you start talking about what you don't like about America, in particular when you're talking to a lot of white people. They said, well, if you don't like it, you can leave. And I said so much to him, and I don't have time to say all of what I said to him. But one of the things I said, listen, I said, as a Muslim, I'm a world citizen. I said, I'm not married to any piece of land. I feel I can go anywhere and adapt. I said, but I tell you what, if you can tell your government to give me back all the taxes that they took from me, I'll leave yesterday. And he looked at me like I was from another place, because who wouldn't want to be in America? In their eyes, like, who wouldn't want to live here? You would want to go somewhere else. This is really how I feel. But when I travel overseas, and yeah, there's racism everywhere, there are issues everywhere. But a lot of the places that I've gone, some of the things that attract me is when I look at like places and there's universal health care. Here you got to make a decision sometimes. So many families, you have over 40 some million people that can't afford health care. And this country is stealing resources from all over the world. It's a very wealthy country in terms of what it has in terms of assets. But yet, and it calls itself civilized and progressive and the leader of civilization. But yet you have, even in some third world countries, where education is free, health care is free, You know, you have, once you buy your house and property, people can argue these points, but once you buy your house, you don't have to worry about if I experience hard times, that if I don't pay my taxes for 3 years, my property taxes, I'm gonna lose this house that I paid for. Right? There's a lot of things, the cost of living, the cost of food, the cost of medicine, right? You go to some of these countries and it's like dollars. I mean, pennies on the dollar. But here you go and you don't have insurance and you're just trying to get Buterol or something for your son or asthma. You don't have insurance. You may pay $300-400.
Okay.
And so this is oppressive.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me, you know, when I look at it, I'm like, man, how in the world so small a number of people in comparison to the millions have been able to keep us from knocking somebody upside the head to get what we need?
Okay.
That's
so
amazing to me.
let me ask you then, what is your suggestion, or what would be your solution briefly? I'm sure that you could probably write a book about that, but what would you suggest to do to make some changes here? Because you're here, your family's here, a lot of our people are here, and they're not leaving and they're not traveling like you are. So what do you feel should be done to make some changes?
Man, you know what? That is the $1 billion, you know, question. I'm still trying to rack my brain around all that can be done. I can give the simple answers, and sometimes the simple things can be the most profound. You know, we always go back to, I think before any change is done, and I know this is going to sound generic, but I think before you get to the point where you can change something, you have to become thoroughly aware that there needs to be a change.
Yes.
And there's so many people, I don't think, that are thoroughly aware, right? Sometimes you hear people, well, what can we do? I'm only one person, right? This place, the country is so big. And I think it's about really educating ourselves. I mean, enlightening ourselves. But that's even a monumental, a huge task, because people are forced to work 2-3 jobs to make ends meet. You know, Said Qutb, who's no longer with us, in some of his old writings talked about how, you know, being able to just have the leisure to think and to ponder has been taken away from us, because you spend so many hours working, right? Away from when you get home, you're tired. You don't even have the leisure and the luxury to think and to strategize, right? About how to come up with solutions. And things are so dislocated. Even how you're educated in school, you go from one subject to the next, and they hardly ever teach you how to bring intersectionality between the subjects. You know, how do I take geography and science and sociology and make them a whole? They become segregated. And even in your world, your business world, you have great ideas, but you're like, well, how do I put it together, right? And so we don't know how to put stuff together, because from the very beginning, we're taught to compartmentalize, to study this in the absence of this, to be this in the absence of this. And it becomes difficult, but definitely educating ourselves, becoming aware of the issues, because I think the more we educate ourselves and become enlightened about something, you know, as they say, when your brain expands, it can't go back to its natural size. Yeah. So, you know, I think what Frederick Douglass said, that knowledge doesn't befit a man to be a slave. At some point, excuse my language, it pisses you off. Yeah. And you get tired of sitting with this information and doing nothing about it. Like Allah says in Quran, don't be like a donkey with books on your back. You got all this information and you're not putting it to use. So, but you know, I can mention, we have to come together generally, right? We have to organize, we have to spend with each other. But then you have situations that happened in 1921, Black Wall Street, when they were doing that. But Amos N. Wilson talks about, yeah, do that, but we also need to formulate an army for when those type of things happen. We'll do that, but we don't have self-defense. So there's so many different things we can do, right? But how to put it all together. I mean, we have scholars, we have people that have studied these issues for years, right? And you like wonder, like, okay, I play basketball and I'm studying now and I'm trying to figure it out, right? And I can give you generic and simple ideas, and some days maybe give you deeper, insightful ideas. But I think we're going to need everybody to, I mean,
Okay,
and
so
that's generic.
no, I did ask the question, and I really wasn't expecting you to give us a full answer, because if we've got the UN, we've got leaders all over this world that are required, not just diplomatically, to do certain things. I wasn't really expecting you to give us the answer that, but from yourself, let me just take us back to when you became a Muslim. And I had a couple of questions I want to ask before we open it up for the Q&A. When and how did you, and I have two questions. When and how did you decide on the name that you have now, Mahmoud Abdul Rauf? How was that selected? Was that you or someone else suggesting? And the other question that I had, that I was trying to get to you about, is during the month of Ramadan, and when you were playing basketball, how did you, because I've often thought about how do brothers fast when they're playing, basketball, if it was a time during when men are playing football or even baseball who may be Muslim, how do you fast? What is it that you have to focus on, knowing that you've got a game to play? So how did you change your name, and what do you do when you're fasting during Ramadan?
My name was changed by going, after I became a Muslim, went into the imam's office. One of the imam suggested that, he asked me, did I choose? I said, no. He suggested that Mahmoud would be a good name for me. I said, I heard all the names have beautiful meanings. The other brother in there said, I think Rauf, Abdul Rauf is a good name. I said, like I said, all the names have beautiful meanings. So the community began to know me as Abdul Rauf. Come to find out, I'm not great with names until I see you a while. And come to find out, I'm listening to people refer to the people that suggested Mahmoud to me and Abdul Rauf to me. Come to find out, that was their name. They wanted me to have their names. And so that's how the name was chosen. Then afterwards, I was given a book, I think, on Muslim names, and I fell in love with some other names. But at that time, the community knew me as Mahmoud Abdul Rauf, so I kept it. As it pertains to fasting, the thing that you think about just simply and plain is just seeking to please Allah. You know, this is an injunction, an order, a command, and you want to obey that command. And you know, for me, I wasn't thinking about failing. I wasn't thinking about. I was so happy, and still, despite our flaws as human beings and my flaws by far, man, I am so elated and happy, and like I was then, even more so now, just to be a Muslim. And I don't want to just stop with being a Muslim. I want to be a muttaqi. I want to be a muhsin, you know. But I just, you know, the excitement that I felt coming into Islam, and I'm just trying to know what because Malcolm for me was an influence. His mind is something that I never came across up to that time. How analytical he was. I'm like, wow, I want to be able to think like that. I want to have courage like that, to be able to say what I want to say and not really care what people think. I don't have that, but I want it. I want it for myself. And so for me, it was just simple. Like I just want to please Allah. And he said, do it, and I'm gonna do it. Inshallah, I'm gonna strive to do it. Yes. And it became literally, man, fasting during the time that you're playing, and it's nothing like it in the world. My focus is heightened. You would think my energy would be low. My energy is on a whole nother level. So I mean, I look forward to fast, you know. So that was my experience.
Let me, as we're bringing our particular portion to a close, I did hear that you have an interest in cooking. You like music. I think I heard that Prince is one of your favorite musicians. Tell us just a little more about, let's say, arts and culture and cooking that you like to do.
Now I'm interested in so many things. I love life. I'm super curious, and I don't ever want to lose that. I think that's how you begin to grow and learn, just being curious about everything. And so, I mean, I love cooking, man. I love experimenting with all the different type of spices that are out there, the different cultural dishes. When I travel, I'm not one to go and eat what you can normally find here. Even here, I'm not looking to eat what you can normally find here. I love to experiment. I taught my children at a very young age how to cook. We would look at channels on the Food Network, and we would, hey, you like that? Let's go make it, and then let's tweak it. Uh, and so, you know, I just love beauty, you know, and I love the fact because especially after, you know, a person knowing what it takes to go through all of what you go through to make it on that level of the NBA. When I see anybody, whether it's a musician, whether it's an artist that's good at what they do, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a thinker, a speaker, I just sit in the, like, even when I look at comedy, right? And I know how some people feel, and I don't really laugh a lot. My mind, when I'm looking at comedy, sometimes I do, but I'm like, wow, look at how he or she put that together. Look how they transition from one topic to the next. I mean, I'm just fascinated, you know. So I look at life like that, like, man, look at the gift that Allah gave this person to be able to draw that or put this. And so I just, so many things, man. I just find beautiful, you know. And not just, I mean, you name it, and cultures, man, just how people think, you know, and how they deal with certain issues, and they problem solve, and how they simplify things. And some people make things more difficult. You know, Allah tells us, you know, he said, you know, observe those who came before you. There's lessons in it if you but knew, right? Look at all of my signs. And so that's what I'm trying to do. And that's why I'm always grabbing books. I'm reading a book now called The Death of Civilization, The Price of Progress. And he's making the distinction between, we think that civilization, you know, it's like Dr. Harriet would say, not all change leads to progress. You know, so we think because we have more buildings and we have these hospitals and we have this medicine and we have all of these things, or even cesarean sections in childbirth. He's breaking down hunter-gatherer societies back then as opposed to now. And he's making a great argument that actually we are less civilized than we think, you know. And we make things, I suggest people to go get this book. It's an amazing book because it makes me think about what Allah says in Quran about, you know, the people before you were more numerous and more advanced. Now you may say, well, hold on, they didn't have airplanes, they didn't have these sky rises, they didn't have all. What do you mean, Allah, they're more advanced, right? What do you mean they were more numerous? You know, it's interesting to me as I'm reading this, but I'm just, I may have gone on a tangent, man, but I'm just curious. I love so much that and then some.
Sister Khan, are you still with us?
Assalamualaikum. I am. Yeah, my name is
Please,
Shazza.
please pose your question.
Thank you so much. First of all, I'm so honored to be here with you all. Thank you so much, Brother Salahuddin, for inviting me. And Brother Mahmoud, I'm joining late. I apologize if I'm asking a question that you've already addressed, but I heard you speak about Brother Malcolm X as one of your role models. I myself am involved with Islamic education or Islamic schools in the US and Muslim youth. And one of the challenges we face is that Muslim youth don't really have strong role models right now. I wonder if you have any suggestions of, first of all, to speak a little bit more about your own role models and to perhaps suggest who we can point to as modern day role models for our children, living current day role models. Do they have to be, do you think that Muslim role models are really important, or anybody and we should take the good from what's out there?
No, I think we all should, I think being a role model is definitely important. I think we should all play a role in that. You know, when Allah speaks about issues of standing up for truth and having great character, this is a role that we all should play. You know, play a part in. Even the hadith that we know about, right? That the best of you is he that people benefit from the most, right? This is playing that role. But I think one of the things, this is just me humbly saying, I think we have to, you know, as kids are being bombarded and people are being bombarded with images and music and television and having so many other role models thrusted upon us, we have to continue to just point to these role models. We have to continue to tell these stories and we can't tire in telling these stories, you know. And sometimes it seems overwhelming because they're being flooded, right, with all of these other images, and it seems like, wow, they're getting so much, right? But I think we have to put our trust in Allah and know that we do our part, and Allah is controlling the outcome. You know, for me, yes, Malcolm still is. I mean, his words still resonate. But I also, you know, when Allah says knowledge, that in other words, no one has a monopoly on knowledge, right? He said, you know, seek it from here to China. And so I'm constantly looking for, that's why I read so much, because you never know where you're going to find inspiration. And sometimes it doesn't necessarily come. You don't have to be a Muslim to be inspired. You know, to be, you know, a person don't have to be a Muslim for you to be inspired by him. But I'm constantly in search of people that's going to inspire me and enlighten me and challenge me. And so for me, even with children, whether I'm talking to non-Muslims or Muslim children, I'm always trying to give them something in a way that they don't feel like I'm forcing it upon them. You know, I might tell them, like even with the Quran, I might mention something, a verse in the Quran without saying it's from the Quran. I might mention something the Prophet said without saying it. Over time, if they like what you're saying, they say, man, where you get this from? Oh, well, you know, that was from the Quran. That was from this, that was from this. But I think it's highly important to just keep pointing to them, keep telling them these stories constantly, because at some point it's going to resonate. It may not be tomorrow, but it may be down. I look at my life, right? You know, a lot of people came through my life, and I was in a space and time where sometimes I received it, sometimes I didn't. But it eventually brought me into Islam, and it eventually brought me to a space where, you know, it's bigger than me, you know, and it's about leaving a legacy of giving and social activism, right? And trying to make change, whether, you know, I'm going to be living to see it. But if those people, you know, if I wasn't constantly searching and paying attention, so you never know when it's going to resonate. But for me, I find, you know, even brothers like, you know, Ahmed, Salahuddin, you know, the Qiblah Circle, they had an organization, I don't know if it still exists, the Mizan brothers, constantly coming back and forth to DC, having conversations. These were role models. You know, I mean, people that when I was younger, everybody plays a part. You know, when I was younger, challenged me on the basketball court, you know, pulling me away from negativity. Those are role models. Sometimes they're great and huge, sometimes, but you're always picking, you know, and picking those little nuggets out of, you know, whoever you can. And for me also, a mentor of mine that, I mean, I just absolutely love, I talk about him a lot, and I know these brothers love him to death too, who's like a jewel in our community, Muhammad Al-Asi. You know what I mean? His writings, I mean, I'm constantly reading his stuff and being inspired by how his mind works. But I don't know if I'm trying to give it all, but yes, we should constantly strive to be role models. We should constantly point in the direction of people that we think are very good people, that inspirational people, that are thought-provoking people. And we should never tire of that. And we just leave the outcome to Allah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Brother Trent, Atlanta, Georgia.
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Trent.
Question for you, Brother Mahmoud. Can you talk about the other Muslim brothers that were in the NBA that you were, you know, that you knew were Muslim? Was there any kind of camaraderie, any kind of relationship that you developed with the other brothers that are Muslim, especially the ones that really kept their fact they were Muslim under wraps, so to speak? Can you speak to that at all?
Well, yes, briefly, the one that we prayed together a lot, and we spoke a good bit, Hakeem Olajuwon. Yeah, every game when I would come to Houston, they had like a prayer room for him, and eventually they got a prayer room for me in Denver. So we would definitely, before and after the game, pray together, and sometimes we'd have time to go eat. I'll go to his house, been to his house in Houston. So those were nice moments. Later on, Sharif Abdul-Rahim, that was playing for Vancouver, Tariq Wahab, that was also, we were on the same team in Sacramento. Those were the brothers that, by and large, well, they were public with their Islam. At one point, Kenny Gill, don't tell me, this is my, from Illinois. What's his name?
Kendall Gill.
Yeah. Kendall Gill ended up, because we would talk, and he ended up embracing Islam.
Alhamdulillah.
So alhamdulillah, it wasn't a lot of us, right? But we had our moments when we would play against each other, and we would try to take advantage of it, and at least at the minimum, like we're gonna pray together, right? And we're gonna give each other the salams and say a few words and off to the next city, because it's a lot of games, and they're rushing you know, in and out of these cities. But alhamdulillah. But I think really, and I know you didn't ask this, you asked about players, but man, and I can't stress this enough, the best education I had. And I'm so grateful to Allah for sending me through the NBA. And I think, you know, the NBA was just meant for me to go through. A lot got me there. I'm just assuming, in order for me to meet enough brothers, man, to help influence me toward this path of Al-Islam, because that's the best education. Like even, you know, Sharif Hashim that spoke earlier, man, I love those brothers. I mean, literally, they just the education that I received from them, the wisdom and their age and their experience, the conversations that we had, man, you can't put a money value to it. And those things will forever stay with me. And that's what continues to influence me to this day. You know, just to hear people, man, the way they articulate things and their views and the questions that they have, I'm like, wow. I mean, literally, that stuff fascinates me. You know, people say, well, like now, back then, if you asked me, what was my interest? Who are my heroes? I would point to basketball players. Now you ask me, I'm pointing to thinkers. You know, people who think, you know, who are articulate. I mean, that's literally, and these are the people that do it for me. And so I just want to say, man, I'm just super grateful, and may Allah bless everybody. I mean, people I know and don't know, who I may see in the airport and just watch them, and they have a character that just make me think about mine. Like, hold on, man, I want some of that. That sister looks so calm and got herself, I want that calmness. Or, man, look at how they smile. I want to be able to smile like that. You know, so I'm always trying to cherry pick qualities off of people that I feel like, man, okay, I got it, but I want it like that. Well, I don't have that, I want that. And so I'm just grateful, mashallah.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you, Mahmoud. Is there a question?
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah barakati. Jazakallah khair, brother, for that presentation. Very informative, very insightful. So growing up in Gulfport, Mississippi, you have Alcorn State there, and you have Jackson State there. And so one of the things, I know you follow these things, there seems to be a move afloat among these top flight athletes, especially in basketball, to start looking at HBCUs, you know, for the culture, the education, etc. Question, did any of them recruit you with all the recruits you had, the HBCUs? And two, what do you see this, is this some kind of sign in terms of more of the outstanding athletes now looking at HBCUs as opposed to the PWIs?
I can't really remember HBCUs recruiting me. It was a different time back then, I think, and probably it was already assumed when you're at that, you know, in terms of your rankings are so high, maybe that, oh, they're going to one of those universities. And they're not wrong in that assumption. And I'm not saying I'm happy and that I'm proud of thinking that way. But now I think there's been a shift with all that's happening in this country. Not that it hadn't happened before, but it's more visible, it seems, now with social media and everything, with, you know, the police brutality, and racial inequalities. I mean, the access to information, you know, even when you're thinking about the prison industrial complex, people are becoming more educated. And a lot of these young people are not falling into or rolling with, you know, the fallacy of America being this super great country. They're challenging it, and so and they're developing. That they're looking at things differently, and they don't want to. Many of them don't want to give their services to a lot of these universities who have historically, right, who have historically exploited them, myself included. You know, you're making millions for universities, and if it wasn't for a lot of these sports programs, right, and a lot of people would.
Okay, yes, man. All right, inshallah.
Scholarships. And so a lot of us as athletes, we go to these schools, and man, I can remember having to call my assistant coach. You know, you would think that I got it made. People thought that when I came to the NBA, I took a price cut. I said, man, and they looked at me like they thought I was lying. I said, man, I did not get paid from LSU. One, I was scared because I didn't want to get caught. And, you know, and I'm like, well, you know, I want to do it the right way. But then I found out, well, really, the joke is on me because everybody else is getting rich, right? And making money. And here it is, my mother's starving. I got to call this coach a couple of nights or even more than that during my career at LSU. I'm on cover of magazines, right? And all of these things. I'm breaking records by the grace and mercy of Allah. And I got to call him, man, I'm hungry. And he has to go to rallies and get me a couple of burgers so I can eat at night. You know, so this is a disgrace, you know, that this happens, and it's been happening for too long. And the NCAA is raking in millions, if not billions of dollars. So these athletes should definitely be compensated for their services. These are, I don't care who they are. I mean, they deserve that. Yeah, they deserve that. So a lot of these players are like, you know what, forget it. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it with a university, you know, of people that look like me, and I'm going to benefit them. Because if I'm good, right, and it's shown, you look at Lindsey Hunter, who came out of Jackson State, right? When it's all said and done, you want somebody that can play, that can get it done. But we know that there are relationships involved too. And I've seen it numerous occasions in the NBA when you will see a guy from a small school and a guy from a big school, and he has a folk as an agent and another one has a small time agent. And this guy from the small school is just outplaying this other guy. But the guy with the big agent and from the big school may get the job. That exists too. It's sad. And you see that side of it that a lot of people don't see. But I think a lot of people, man, definitely it's a sign of the times now. I still think it's going to take a lot more for more people to go in that direction, right? But this is a start. And as these players begin to make that decision, and they do well, and I hope they do extremely well, and I hope they go to the NBA and just become better than Jordan and LeBron, then it'll probably influence more people to say, you know what, man, I'm going to take that step too. And I'm going to go over there as well.
Thank you for that.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
But you know, actually, when I first put my hand up, the question was about, you know, your relationship with other players, and specifically Hakeem Olajuwon. But someone took that question. But I'm gonna take a few minutes to say, my brother, I know we're connected on Facebook. I know we met a couple of times, but I want to thank you on behalf of my students in past years, because you have been a big part of my classroom, you know, here in PG County, Maryland, from 9th to 12th grade. Everyone knows your name because of the lessons that we learn from you. I make sure my students learn from it. So just want to say that, thank you. Keep doing what you're doing and being an inspiration, and hope that the young people can take it to the next level.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Go ahead, sister.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you, Brother Mahmoud, for joining us today. We were told that you were going to speak some about the work that you do with social justice. And I know I joined late, and from what I understand, you haven't spoken much about that yet. So, and I know the time is really short, but if you could just kind of capsulize some of the work that you're doing in social justice, because I just like to be aware of what you're doing and, you know, see, because I need to do something in social justice myself. But inshallah, if you have time, you can kind of share that a little bit. I know we're kind of short, but if you could go ahead. Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, all of these little things. I mean, I don't say this is little, but all of even events like this is in relation to, you know, trying to highlight as much as you can about what's going on in the world. But I try to involve myself and not limit myself to just one organization. I've done a lot of work with Legal Fund of America. I've done work with the Mahmoud Foundation. I've done work with ISNA and Islamic Relief, traveled to Kenya, traveled to Somaliland, to Jigjiga, to Ethiopia. And I'm just trying to I love hands-on. You know, I love to get my hands dirty. I said, don't take me to a place and just take photos. You know, literally, I want to get sweaty. I want to be sore. You know what I mean? And I want to be out there touching people and all of that. So there's a lot of work that a lot of these organizations do with building wells, to supporting education, to supporting healthcare, to supporting farmers, so that they're able to provide and sustain. And they're doing it in a way that's sustainable, giving back, right? To where you teach a person, you know, and so give a person a fish, they live for a day, but you teach them how to fish, they can continue to live. So this is, fortunately, from what I've seen and from what I've experienced, what they're focusing on. And that's my philosophy. As much, of course, there's some people you have to give anyway. You know, you can't, you know, it might not sustain them like that. You just have to give because they're in need. But by and large, a lot of these organizations are doing that, to where they're giving in a way to where they're trying to teach people how to take care of themselves. Even women, in terms of supporting a lot of them, and if some of them want to sew and make clothes, right? There's so many areas that these organizations are touching on, providing water, clean water. And you don't really understand sometimes until you get into this, just the value of what water does. You know, not just in bathing yourself, but providing food. And, I mean, just so much. But alhamdulillah, that's kind of what I'm doing.
Alhamdulillah.
Again, thank you, brothers and sisters, for joining us for this Sunday, inshallah, the Qiblah Circle. You are invited to come back at any time, because this circle is your circle, inshallah. And I mean, we really mean that, because we need all of us. All of us are the chain that keeps us together, inshallah. So I'm going to ask Brother Abdul Latif to close us out, inshallah, with an ayah.
God is good.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر اللهم صل على
ألا بذكرك قلبي يطمئن ألا بذكرك قلبي يطمئن وهل بغير ذكرك قلب المرء يرتاح فأنت مبدع هذا الكون أجمعه وأنت خالق من جاء ومن راح